So welcome. This is Wisdom in Nature's mutual empathy space for change makers. And we have a short talk in this next section that our friend colleague Marc Pell is gonna be delivering. And I'll just mention the title of the talk before handing over to Marc. And the title of the talk, which will be for about 7 minutes, is When Conversations Get Painful, Moving from Reactivity, which I know I can get into when conversations get painful, moving from reactivity to connection. So I'm really curious to hear what Marc has to say.
Okay, thank you, Mozamo. When moving from reactivity to connectivity, reactivity to connection, or deepening quality of connection. So NVC is nonviolent communication. It's very much about developing a quality of connection with others, and which also with ourselves as they go together. And so Marshall Rosenberg, who founded or created nonviolent communication, has a number of different frameworks, and one of the core frameworks is recognizing two different states of consciousness that are often generally present with people and really affect how connection actually pans out between people and with oneself. And so to identify these two different modes of consciousness, he's used two animals to do so, and he's using a jackal and a giraffe. And so the jackal, which I think is generally most people would be familiar with because it's very much how our culture is based on, represents an animal that's clever, quick, and very reactive, and it sees, it's representing a way of seeing which is very binary. So it sees things very much in terms of right or wrong, or good or bad, and as so, it's very much a kind of a cognitive framework that tries to filter everything through that way. And what it means in terms of relating to others is often means there's a lot of judgment involved. And judgment is the evaluation of other people's behavior in terms of usually it's like it's bad for whatever reason, and also ourselves. So it's often an ongoing voice that we have where we're judging ourselves in terms of good or bad. Often bad, but it could be either. But so I've got examples here of some phrases that can be associated with the voice of the jackal. One is like, "You never listen to me. You're being so selfish right now. I can't believe you would do that." Or, "You are being defensive." So it's critical and judgmental. And the same kind of voice applies to ourselves, like, "Why am I so stupid?" Or, "I'm so awful to people," or, "I get everything wrong." A very much of a learned response for many of us, and it's often connected with how we've been taught to meet our needs by essentially the use of guilt, the use of shame, and the use of pressure and force, which is essentially some kind of violence towards others or ourselves to try and meet our needs. And so criticism, judging, the application of reward and punishment, and also moral judgment is part of that framework. So the giraffe is a very different animal altogether. It really obviously does look very different. And one of the reasons why the giraffe was chosen as the other animal is because it's got the biggest heart of any land animal, and it's also got the longest neck. And so the heart represents empathy. So that's really important to be active. And the neck represents perspective. So seeing more curiosity and wanting to see clearly about what is happening. And the perspective points towards looking at how things interconnect, how they relate, and how they affect each other. So there's a I'm just checking my notes to keep on track here. So NVC, using these two, so the jackal essentially is used to highlight conflict, the mode of conflict, inner conflict and conflict with others. But the giraffe is pointing towards how do we behave and be in a different way that's to do with connection, a different way of being together and with yourself. There's a brief kind of framework that's offered by NVC that's not really a technique, but it can be used as a kind of a framework to support a practice of being in giraffe mindset, if that's what one chooses. And in terms of the title, going from conflict to connection, the way to do that is to put attention on the giraffe mode of consciousness. That is the way to do it. And so these are some practical ways of supporting that shift. So one is essentially it's looking at experience through observation, feeling, needs, and requests. And just very briefly to say what that means. So observation is looking at one's experience and other people's behavior purely as an observation without evaluating it in terms of good or bad. It's saying this and this and this happened. Somebody walked across the street, rather than some kind of criticism. They were being stupid. That would be an evaluation of a way somebody walked for whatever reason. So you don't do the evaluation, you just do the observation. And then the next part, especially if we're talking about people having a little bit of a difficulty between each other, is you look at feeling. What's my feeling? What's going on with feeling? It's really important to put attention on what feelings are present. And following that would be to identify needs, because a lot of conflicts generally, people trying to meet their needs, and you've got conflicting aspects, often conflicting strategies to meet needs that can often be met together. And so it's important to be conscious of those needs. And so to be, what's my needs? What needs are present? And also guessing what needs are present with the other person, and also what feelings are present with the other person. And then as we come to the end of my time, just to finish off with the final bit of this framework. So when it's in respect to other people, how to go forward with trying to meet needs together, often a request is used to do so. And the request is different than what Jackal would use as demands, i.e. I'm asking you to do this, and if you don't, there's going to be some unwelcome consequence to you. So it's veiled in violence. Whereas a request doesn't have any violence associated with it. And it's literally, if the person says no, there's no unwelcome consequence. And really, that's what one can do yourself to part of, I think, to find that way is to maybe support the other person to say no. You actually want the other person to, yes, thank you. I know, you're right. The other person to give a full answer without any fear, really. So that's very, very brief, touching on the framework.
Great. So thank you, Marc. I'll just come in there. Thank you for that.
Okay, you're welcome.
Like fitting that into such a short space and doing so succinctly. So we're going to pause the recording, and we're going to continue with the meeting of Mutual Empathy Space for Change Makers, and